You know, there's so much controversy happening in the United States right now with ICE, who are also wearing uniforms and wearing masks, and so there's you don't know people walking around with uniforms in an American city. There are some Americans that might object to that, and so apparently this shooting has happened.
You can't hate our media enough. You really can't hate our media enough. The soon-to-be unemployed asshole that you just heard in that clip, his name is Ken Dilanian. Before yesterday afternoon, Kenny was unknown to everyone besides his parents. And for reasons unknown, MSNBC, or I guess MSNOW or MSNOW. What a stupid name for a cable news network. But to their credit, I guess, it seems that MSNOW knew in the moment that Captain Doofus was being inappropriate. I assume that's why they attempted to cut him off towards the end of that segment. Of course, they did forget to cut his mic, but I would expect nothing less from this incompetent network who donated woke welfare for years to the wicked weave Joy Reid. This is the second time in less than 3 months that there has been a national tragedy, and the so-called reporting from MSNBC has been absolutely disgusting. Their reporting was similar in the immediate aftermath of Charlie Kirk. From my understanding, what I heard in that clip, it sounds like Ken Dilanian was insinuating that the National Guard was responsible for their own shooting, because we have uniformed officers, many of which are volunteers. Most of these brave young men and young women in the National Guard, they are doing this on a part-time basis. But according to Ken Dilanian, because these brave men and brave women are volunteering their time to ensure that we have a nice Thanksgiving, their presence could possibly trigger some overweight dude with man boobs, causing him to have an emotional meltdown and start randomly shooting people in uniform. MSNBC, MSNOW, is an absolute disgrace. New name, same garbage. You can disagree with the Trumper sending in the National Guard to woke cities that are starting to resemble third world dumps. You can disagree with the decision. You can prove your ignorance by claiming that Don Trump is a dictator, a tyrant. But the men and women in the National Guard, the men and women volunteering their time to keep you safe, it's not their fault. They're innocent. They are simply following orders. And I know Democrats are encouraging them to defy the orders of the president. Fortunately for the rest of us, the National Guard is like the rest of the country, and they ignore doofus Democrats. This shooting in Washington, D.C., it happened yesterday afternoon as I was preparing the video on Zohran Mamdani. While I was recording, I received an alert from USA Today claiming that the 2 victims in the National Guard had passed away in the hospital. Thankfully, that report ended up being false. As of 8:30 this morning when I'm recording this video, the victims are still in critical condition in the hospital fighting for their lives. Hopefully, they are able to make a full recovery. The shooter is a 29-year-old man named Ramanullah Lakhanwal. According to CBS News, the alleged shooter worked with the CIA in Afghanistan. He was allowed into the country 4 years ago under a program for Afghan nationals called Operation Allies Welcome. Operation Allies? We have allies in Afghanistan? Look, I'm all for having allies in Middle Eastern countries. I know the military, I know the CIA has to have insiders in these foreign countries to gather intelligence. But that doesn't mean those allies should be allowed to live here in America. Ram was one of 8,000 from Afghanistan who were allowed into the country for humanitarian reasons. Take a guess. Take a wild guess as to who approved this program. Our former fearless leader, Johnny B. Biden. I don't know about you guys, but I'm tired of America being the place for refuge for the world. I'm tired of America being the world's police. I'm tired of America being the rehabilitation center, for lack of a better word, for the world. I'm tired of feeling sorry for people in Somalia and letting them move here for humanitarian reasons. I'm tired of the mainstream media claiming that we are privileged, which we are. It is definitely a privilege to be born here in America. It's definitely a privilege to live in America. But that doesn't mean that privilege is owed to Afghanistan. It would be one thing if we were rescuing people who assimilate to our culture. And look, I'm sure some, or maybe even most of them do. I'm sure some of the 8,000 from Afghanistan have assimilated to American culture and we don't even know they're here, which, great, fine. But the problem with these humanitarian rescue efforts, the problem with rescuing people from these third world dumps, it is impossible to vet everyone. There's not enough manpower to look into the background of 8,000 people. So you're going to have people in that group that are potentially dangerous. You're going to have people in that group that refuse to assimilate. You're going to have people in that group who are sympathetic to Islamists, or they are Islamists themselves. There have been multiple reports, and I don't know if these reports are confirmed. This particular report I'm talking about, it's coming from Nick Sorter. He's usually reliable, but this has not been confirmed by the FBI. Of course, it damn sure hasn't been confirmed by the mainstream media. Hell, even if this ends up being true, I would imagine that the woke media would do everything they can to not report it. But according to Nick Sorter, the Afghan national was shouting Allahu Akbar during the attack. You guys remember that phrase from the Religion of Peace, right? Speaking of peaceful religions, you know what I never or rarely hear about? I never hear about radical Buddhists using a crowded mall for target practice. I never hear about radical Hindus using airplanes as weapons. I never hear about radical Christians, or as the media prefers to call us, white Christian nationalists. I never hear about those pesky white Christian nationalists shooting at our National Guard. Now, I do see white Antifa soldiers in Portland constantly attacking ICE. Since 1979, there have been almost 67,000 Islamic terror attacks in the world. Since 1979, there have been around 16,790 days, which means there are an average of 4 Islamic terror attacks per day. Ironically enough, between 80 and 90% of the victims of these attacks, other Muslims, which is probably why so many Muslims want to escape these Islamic countries and come here to America to have the chance to live in peace. And look. I get it. If I were them, I would want the exact same thing. And in a perfect world, we would be able to help all of them. In a perfect world, we would be able to determine if the family that we were rescuing from Iran was a father and a mother with their young son. The father would immigrate to America. He would start his own business. He would never become wealthy, but he would instill American values in his son. He would raise his son in a Christian home, and that son would grow up to become one of the leading conservative voices in America. I'm sure you guys have heard of him before because I'm talking about Patrick Bet-David. Growing up, I went to school with a girl whose family had escaped Lebanon. Lebanon used to be a country with a Christian majority. But over time, the religion of peace eventually took over, and the Christians in Lebanon escaped to various countries throughout the world. This particular family, they escaped to the Gulf Coast, and you would have never known they were from Lebanon. Again, I don't know if this report from Nick Sorter is true. I don't know if this attack was motivated by Islam. It's entirely possible that it wasn't. What I do know is this attack could have been prevented if the attacker was still living in Afghanistan. And I also know that the National Guard is not to blame. Like I said earlier, this is the second time in 2 months that MSNOW has provided absolutely disgusting coverage of a national tragedy. Before it was announced that Charlie Kirk had passed away, Matthew Dowd was describing Charlie Kirk as one of the most divisive people in America. According to Matt, Charlie Kirk delivers hate speech. He attacks marginalized groups. Basically, Matthew Dowd was insinuating that Charlie Kirk was responsible for his own demise. And now we have this unknown doofus named Kenny insinuating that uniformed officers on the street are triggering. According to the Daily Mail, Captain Doofus was defending the shooter instead of defending the victims. Just think about that. When normal people initially heard about this yesterday afternoon, your first thought was of the victims. Are they okay? Maybe you prayed for them. Maybe you prayed for their families. Maybe you appreciated the fact that they are working to keep the streets safe on the day before Thanksgiving so you could enjoy Thanksgiving with your family. What was one of the first thoughts from Kenny D at MSNBC? I'm sure seeing uniformed officers on the street was emotionally painful for the shooter. Yeah, because it's not like people are walking around with guns in Afghanistan. Sound off in the comments below. I'll see you guys later.